Welcome to another episode of Inspired Content, where we'll be looking at another movie that maybe is a little harder to come by these days. But I did watch it a long while back, but I didn't give it the Inspired Content treatment, or take a look at it and see what ideas and inspirations I can get from it. So, the movie is Legend. So I'll be taking a look at that, and I'll see you on the other side. Alright, so, Legend. I would have to say that I don't remember this movie at all. I thought I remembered this movie, I just remember bits and pieces. I didn't remember the movie at all. But the story is much simpler than I remember it. But the film itself is just gorgeous. And it's just kind of, for me at least, it's a classic. So I'm going to have to say it's a 5.6 out of a 6.3. But yeah, I'm finding out who some of the actors are and what else they've done is also kind of surreal for me. I hadn't realized just who some of the characters are played by and what they've done since then, and it was a fun trip down memory lane. But the ideas it inspires. Okay, so the first one I'm going to come out here with is there's a point in the movie where Lily throws her ring out into a pond and says, "Whoever finds it, I will marry." And she's doing it as a kind of to spur Jack to do things for her. But in the way that so much is done in this story, where there's that sort of things are bound to the rules of fairy tales, where of course that's the only way it's going to happen. Well, there's another part of the story where there's a fairy who is named Una, and she has a crush on Jack too, and she wants Jack to love her, and when he can't love her because he loves Lily, she feels spurned and bitter about it. And it just, in the back of my mind, I said, okay, so if she's really bitter about it, and she knows that he wants to be with Lily, and the only way that's going to happen is through the ring, what if she goes and tries to hide the ring? But if you're binding by the rules of the land of the fairies, the person who finds the ring, Lily has to marry. So I think it would be kind of a fun twist to do the kind of Lily and Una get married, and neither of them are super enthusiastic about it, and they both have this little love triangle going on with Jack, who wants to be with Lily, and Una wants to be with Jack. I think that would be like a fairy tale comedy drama romance that would be totally out of character with the way this movie goes, but an interesting twist on the ideas they use in this movie. Well, this one's a little different. There's a part in the story where one of the characters that works for Darkness, seemingly a goblin, reveals himself to be a former elf, like Gump. But at some point, and it's revealed in some of the bonus scenes, that character was, one of his arms was twisted into a more goblin-like arm. And so the implication in that is that goblins are a corruption of other beings. And so it would be interesting to see the story of what that's like and where that comes from. So writing a story where it's assumed that goblins are just these creatures that exist in the realm, but in fact it's a corruption of already existing characters. There's a scene where Lily, being held by darkness, the Minotaur-like character, is sort of caught in a dance with a shadowy figure that they eventually merge. And there's a part of me who's got to wonder, is there a story of the shadow character before the merger? Are there more of that type of being? Is this somebody who's been enslaved to serve the purposes of darkness? Is it an incomplete person? Is it Lily's own shadow given life and then merged with her? It's never explained, and I think exploring this sort of throwaway shadow that doesn't have a story and make it a story about that type of being and give them form and a sense of being. Part of that scene with Lily where she's dancing and she gets merged with her shadow, it's supposedly the making her one of them, where darkness tries to corrupt her and make her one of them. And I can't help but feel that there's a story to be told if instead of killing one of the unicorns, they corrupted it. And what would that be like? Okay, and again, Lily being corrupted by darkness. But in this case, where I see this story could have gone is that once she's brought into that realm of being darkness, she doesn't necessarily have to support the cause or the agenda or the actions of darkness, but now as one of them, the possibility exists for her to overthrow darkness and take its place. But in this case, where darkness is talked about at the end, he talked about how he and light are just brothers, opposite sides of the same force, and all things contain a bit of each of them. I gotta wonder if, knowing that, the possibility of Lily taking the role of the new figure of darkness in the realm, if perhaps it's more of a balanced Jack and the elves on the light and Lily and the goblins on the dark, and it's not oppositional necessarily, as just acknowledging sort of like how they have their roles in the lives of each other and leaving them to each other's roles, but still having that kind of connection with one another. This one was a little bit of a different idea, and I think it could make a really good story just going in a bit of a different direction, where instead of just kind of forcing the issue and introducing Gump and Una and the dwarves, Screwball and Tom, instead of just throwing them in sort of like they had no cause to be there yet and it's not really given much reason for it, I think it would be more interesting if Jack is on a quest to get Lily back, and in doing so he encounters the monsters that he encounters along the way in this story, but part of the quest is to get them to assist him in his mission. And that could be because some of them want to overthrow darkness and gain some of the power that he's taken from them. They want to be their own forces in nature rather than servants of darkness. Or some of it's just greed or hunger, so some of the characters he would encounter would be the Meg Knucklebones, the swamp hag, and she would be just as content to eat any human figure, would that, even if that were the monks that were assisting darkness in the sacrifice. Promise her many, many humans that she could feast upon. The Goblin Bix, the one that's rhyming, we already see a scene where that goblin is gets to the point where they decide they may not give the severed horn to darkness, they may keep the power for themselves. You've already got somebody there who's potentially could be led away. And one of the others would be the butcher ogres that are chopping up beings and eating them in the dungeon. I imagine you could see one of those as somebody you could lead their simple mind towards fighting for your cause. And I don't know. If you want to have the same number of people on his team as you had in the movie, you could have the gargoyles that were in Darkness's chamber. One of them was moving and self-aware in some fashion, maybe one of those, or maybe one of the monks that was going to serve in the sacrifice. So there are options for some of those things that I think it would be interesting to assemble a party of monsters to fight the head monster. And that's what your hero character does. So that's some of the ideas I came up with this. I actually do think some of those would make good stories. I'd have to depart from some of the roots that came from this movie and make it its own thing, because some of them depart too much from the goal of this movie to be a fairly simple, straightforward legend. But yeah, it was fun to see this movie again. Alright, so next week doing a board game. I'll see you then. Take care.